Providing this online video service incurs substantial costs, from production expenses to maintenance fees for the online broadcast video servers. Whilst Web Channel 9 is offered free of charge, you're invited to sponsor the channel when you use the service. By clicking on this Sponsor Now link, you can use PayPal to donate £2, £5, £10, £15 or £20. All sponsorship funding is used to support Web Channel 9, which is an entirely not-for-profit public service endorsed by the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United Kingdom.
Friends, appreciate very much the National Spiritual Assembly having invited me here to join your summer school this year, and I look forward to getting to know you. Some of you, many of you I know already, but others I haven't met. Be happy to see you, greet you individually whenever you wish. The subject this week that I have chosen to focus on in these talks, you see, is characterized as the 4 challenges. I suppose one could call them by different names, but for a title that would suit the program, we've chosen to call them that. In the last years of Shoghi Effendi's ministry, he kept stressing over and over with the Baha'is the need for 4 things. He said these 4 things will bring success to their efforts. And those 4 were prayer, meditation, study, and action. And he goes into a bit of detail. I'll read a few of the quotations that brought this attention forward. He wrote first to the hands of the cause of God about this matter, and then to national assemblies and to individuals. He stressed it. Of course, this is very inclusive of all of our activities as Baha'is, and reflects also in the core activities that we have throughout the world in the local Baha'i communities. But it's interesting to consider the teachings on each of these 4 subjects and see what kind of fresh inspiration we might derive from them, how this may add to wherever we are in our own spiritual growth, move us forward, open new vistas to us of confirmation. And so when we consider these 4, the first 3, prayer, meditation, and study, as we can see, are really internal things. So that the action, which should be the result, in which Shoghi Effendi says without action, if just prayer and meditation and study doesn't result in action, it really hasn't fulfilled its purpose. The House of Justice has stressed this in some of its messages, in more recent years too, that study should lead to action. And the action, the quality of the action, however, is affected by the other 3. You can't just do the action without these 3. You will soon run out of energy. You'll soon be saying to yourself, I'm so tired of these cycles of growth, I don't know if I can bear another one. Or, I try to teach the faith, but nobody's interested. If you have that problem, these 3 are the solution. We'll see. Look at it. And this is a terrible dilemma when we notice in our own life that we don't seem to be effective when we mention the faith. It doesn't produce a spark of interest and appreciation. Of course, there are populations, and there are other populations, and we're trying to find those areas in our society that will be receptive and more easily amalgamated into communities, active, vibrant communities on the ground. The Guardian said as soon as the Baha'is learn how to have this love and fellowship, then their gatherings will become like magnets. They will attract waiting souls. They will attract those who are longing to understand the reason that they're alive and why the world is in the situation that it's in. And we are among the super privileged of society, that we have some insight into those two very important truths: the purpose of our existence and what the problems society is facing, so that we might, through the divine remedies, solve and resolve those problems. That places on us a terrific responsibility, and the Guardian mentions that too. I remember in the last years of his ministry, before his passing, one of the friends from the West wrote to him and said that Shoghi Effendi, there's so much pushing. You seem to be pushing us always to get up, to pioneer, to contribute, to give our time. It's a lot. It's too much. Almost too much. I hope they didn't say too much, but they said something. We didn't see the incoming letter. We saw the Guardian's outgoing letter. And he mentions that he said some of the friends feel that there's too much pressure on them. Do you feel like that sometimes? I'm sure you do. Also because of the needs of the Baha'i community. And the Guardian said, this is not the Guardian's pressure. He said, it's the pressure of historical circumstances. It's the pressure of the responsibilities we, small band of people, out of the billions on the face of the planet, have, because we know the solution. We know what the remedy is. That puts us in a position between God and humanity that we want to be sure we're fulfilling our part, what God wants from us, because we've received this divine bounty and favor. Such a favor that Abdu'l-Baha says in one of his tablets is, if for the knowledge we have of the Blessed Beauty and having been able to recognize Him, if we prostrated ourselves, he says, 1,000 times a day, it would be insufficient. You just ask a few times in the obligatory prayers, friends, so don't feel pressured by that. How can we arise then to this challenge of the historical circumstances that surround us? And we see humanity each day. This situation is getting worse and worse. Baha'u'llah asked about this in his own time, said, "It is not seemly we should reveal to you the future of mankind, what's going to happen in the immediate future." Shoghi Effendi used to say that the Master talked about how brilliant the distant future was. He said he also wanted to say in that how dark the immediate future would, the near future. The distant future is bright, the near future is very dark. It seems as if all the lights of humanity, all the hope of humanity has to enter a very, very dark period, so that they perceive from you, from us, the light of the future. If our lamp is not lit, if our leaven doesn't work, then we're all in for a terrible time. And he said the Baha'is will suffer along with the others, because we're part of humanity. The key message of Abdu'l-Baha in the West, as I understand it, was particularly the recognition of the oneness and wholeness of the human race, and the love that we should have for our fellow human beings. You're all familiar with the dimension of the Baha'i writings that says that we cannot know the Creator. He is invisible, unapproachable, undiscernible, and that's because He is the container. He surrounds and contains everything, and we're within that realm, so we can't possibly completely surround Him in any way. And he tells us that He has placed signs in creation. Through the verses of God, He says that He's placed signs in the world and signs in ourselves, that we can know God through those signs, come to recognize Him. And the most great sign of all is the manifestation of God, he tells us. He's the supreme sign. So through these signs we gain an appreciation of the Creator, at least of His names and attributes, which is the means by which He describes Himself, if you will, to us. And as we learn these names and attributes, as we begin to see them function in our own lives and in our community, and some of you will have perceived this in something called the Virtues Program, and the interest that there is in positive action in general in humanity. All of this proceeds from the signs of God. Amongst those signs are the verses of God, and the verses are the means of guidance that we have in order to gain this understanding that we need to be able to operate effectively. The channels, the means through which we come to this knowledge: prayer, meditation, and study. And each day we're going to consider some of the aspects of the teachings on those various points so that we could, if you will, reappraise where we stand in relation to the challenge that they present to us. As Rob was saying, I met with the Baha'is in Singapore, and they were having their summer school. There were Baha'is from all around the small community that they had, the small size of Singapore, but there were also Baha'is from Malaysia and from Indonesia and from the Philippines that were there. There was a lot of vibrant enthusiasm. And I'm sure if they had a chance, they would greet you all tonight. But you should realize you're kind of on the opposite sides of the earth. Although there's been rain in both spots recently, a lot of it. That they would rejoice in being with you as well. My wife and I have resettled now after so many years, 50 years, away from the United States. We've resettled in Northern California, and we're dealing with the plan at the local level there in a small community of 25 Baha'is. The future of the plan is always presents to us having to think in new ways and explore new possibilities. You know, in the years that I was in the Holy Land at the Teaching Center, and then serving with the House of Justice itself, we saw that so many of the situations we're facing, the challenges again came one after the other. You know, in the marvelous services of the Hands of the Cause of God during the crusade, the 10-year crusade of the Beloved Guardian, were quite extraordinary. I mean, they pushed themselves to the limits to travel, oftentimes having to abandon their families, sometimes together with their spouses. They moved around the world and animated the Baha'is so that we accomplished the goals of the Beloved Guardian's World Crusade. In the process, we became very eager to enroll new believers. Now, that's the goal of the whole process, is that we should increase the size of the Baha'i community, but not just the size of the Baha'i community, but the capacity of the community to expand itself, to extend itself. And the emphasis on that was so intense. I remember there was a lot of controversy in the community. They said, should we expand or should we consolidate? And the House of Justice was saying we need to do both. We have to find a way to both expand the faith and consolidate the faith. And as the horse got away from the barn, so to speak, it began running, and we began enrolling everywhere. A few Baha'i teachers in these various countries would go into new areas, into villages, into tribal regions, and get a terrific response, positive response from people, that they accepted the message. It was a sincere acceptance, I think, of places where I was involved, that what I could see, it was marvelous. It wasn't easy work, and it was so heady. Some of you may have been involved in those places and around the world. It was so heady that you just went on village after village, you know. And we kind of left it the National Assembly will have to figure out how to consolidate it. We're going to go on and bring new Baha'is. What we need is great masses and numbers and so on. And the enrollments began piling up on all sides. And the National Assemblies were saying, go back and visit the people again. And people would say, well, we have new horizons we want to go on to. And it wasn't very well coordinated, but it was the result of a terrific fervor and enthusiasm on the part of a few teachers. The few teachers, finally, they got tired, you know. And they would have peers arrest them, and they'd go out, and of course they would want, some of them would say, we're expansion people. Consolidators are somebody else. So enough months would pass, or a year or more would pass, and then the poor consolidator went in with the list of names to try to find the people that had enrolled in the cause. And sometimes they would meet the people and they'd get scolded about why you didn't come back, or what was the message again, or you never sent me my subscription that you promised me, or we don't know those people, or those people are dead. I remember I went to one community that traveling teacher had sent in a whole long list of names, and we asked about them. He said, no, he's been dead for years. No, that has been dead for years. In the end, we understood that the travel teacher was discouraged that he couldn't raise any of the believers, and he'd gone to the cemetery and copied down the names. That was, of course, that was a spiritual move of sorts, but we couldn't really consolidate those people. So this went on decades. The House of Justice reporting to us in Rizwan messages, 500,000 new Baha'is here and 100,000 there. And it was gradually the National Spiritual Assembly members that were coming to the Holy Land on pilgrimage would confidentially say that we feel so bad. We're reporting the enrollments, but we can't find the original ones from 10 years ago, and 5 years ago, and 3 years ago. And I, for one, am not going to be a supporter of these mistruths that are coming and enthusing the House of Justice, and we just don't have those bases. So then the next stage, in the 80s, they were reporting that there is tallies of how many believers there were in the country. They were all going down all over the world. Down, down, down. Okay. I had a theory, the way I viewed it all, and that is that we have in the faith a steady growth of souls that are consolidating themselves and becoming strong Baha'is. And that the rhythm of that doesn't seem to change particularly, but above that steady growth are some fluctuations. They go up and they go down, but that doesn't mean that the bottom has fallen out of it. The bottom's still coming up. It's just that the flare of it, the popular growth and decreases and increases, and the challenges of that, gradually the House of Justice watched this pattern for a while, and then it took, if you will, a deep breath and said it's going to have to look at the whole situation of the Baha'i world and apply some remedial measures. And in the process of that, the Institute was born, 1996. And the 4-year plan, and the House of Justice projected these, first there were 3 of the core activities, now junior youth have been added to the core activities, as something to be done at the local level. And they began talking about this preparing capacity for the entry by troops. And they also, in the process, I think you see the House of Justice, and this was reflected very beautifully in the film that we had this evening. They brought to the attention that every Baha'i is an element in this, and not just well-known Baha'i speakers. And people had fallen back mostly in the cities and in the educated centers to have firesides, meetings where you had a well-known speaker or somebody that could speak about the faith, because heaven knows I couldn't speak about the faith. Everybody said, felt that they were less than the other teachers of the cause. And the house wanted to re-emphasize, this is my take and my understanding on the situation, friends. God help, this is not any way absolute truth. This is a very biased way I'm looking at it, but maybe it'd be helpful to you to know this process of what was going on. So, ex-house member for sure, okay? Former house member, whatever. So now we see this process going on in the world of Baha'u'llah saying he is called upon every Baha'i to arise and share the message. And it's not enough to have just a few in the community that are able to do that. The majority of Baha'is need to learn how to do this. Not only learn how to do it, but need to take on personally the responsibility of capacity building, of realizing that they have a role they can play, and that Baha'u'llah has said, teach the cause, because this is the greatest bounty, the greatest gift from God that you have. It's not a gift you want to avoid in any way. And as challenging as it may be, you want to engage yourself in it, because it is the means of opening those inner flowing of divine confirmations. Whoever doesn't engage in the teaching of the cause, Shoghi Effendi says the divine confirmations will be cut off, for sure will be cut off from them. He's repeating Abdu'l-Baha the same way. We have to be engaged to the measure of our capacity and ability in serving the cause, in moving it forward, however we can. And upon that depends our spiritual safety, and indeed, in a selfish sense, on that depends our eternal life, the experience we will be involved in the world to come. So it can be seen as selfish to do this. One side, it's a sacrifice. As soon as you're doing it, you realize it's not a sacrifice, it's a bounty. But it seems like a sacrifice at the beginning, because willfulness and what do you call it? The stillness that we have, the apathy we have in ourselves, difficult for us to move. It's some of the acts that the community is engaged in seem outside our own personality. We're challenged by that as well. How can we move forward with the whole plan, both reviving ourselves and contributing to the community? And the House of Justice then defined these devotional meetings and children's classes, particularly, adding later junior youth to the question, and then the study circles, where Baha'is together reflect on a course of studies, presently the Ruhi courses, and share ideas with each other and begin to experience that magic of being able to contribute something in a gathering of reflection and consultation from themselves. If you look in the tablets of gleanings about the requests of Baha'u'llah makes on all of us to arise to teach, there's no footnotes at the bottom that says, in order to do this, you should be strong, you should be beautiful, you should be rich, you should dress properly, none of those things are there. He just says, everybody has to engage in this. He calls all of us to do it. So I think one of the things we want to think about this week is what a bounty that is, that he's opened this to us. A little bit of history, you know, the fact that the Bab faced such resistance was that the situation of teaching religion was not a matter neither in the Muslim world nor in the Christian world. You didn't arise to teach your faith. That was not a possibility for the common individual believer. And if you did pronounce something, everyone would look at you like, that's not your domain. So for this young merchant, the Bab, to arise and begin revealing divine verses and proclaiming divine teachings, that was impossible. You had to go to school, you had to memorize the Quran in a language which wasn't your own, in Iran, for example. And then you might get into one of these schools, and after years of teaching, you could be considered a teacher. You might be some kind of a teacher. Look what Baha'u'llah has removed all of that. He's forbidden clergy, removed clergy. The Baha'is themselves must be the pastors and the caretakers of humanity. Individually, we're all responsible for that. He says so in a letter. We'll come to that in the course of the week too. So that becomes a very a major issue also. The most unlikely people, friends, have raised up the cause of God around the world. Many of you know some of them. You are some of them. The one that comes right to my mind at the moment is Leonora Armstrong. Young Leonora Armstrong was just coming out of college in 1919, when after the war, the Great War, which we're now seeing the centenary of that war, Abdu'l-Baha was able to send the tablets of the Divine Plan to America, which was the great plan for the execution and development of the propagation of the faith throughout the world. And Leonora was in the audience when these tablets were first read out and were unveiled. You've heard about the unveiling of the divine. Actually, it was an unveiling. There were easels on the platform, and there were curtains with drawstrings, and they would open the drawstrings and they would see the tablet to Canada, or they would open that and see the tablet to the southern states. And young girls in the community had been chosen to pull the strings, and Ria Khanum, as a child, was one of those youth that pulled the string to open one of these tablets. Quite amazing ceremony that they had. As a result of that, Martha Root got fired up. And she was the first one to arise and go forth in response to this call of Abdu'l-Baha. And she got on a ship, and she sailed to South America, and she visited the ports down the Atlantic side of that great continent. And she'd arrive, and the boat would stop, maybe would stop for 24 hours or something. She'd get off, and in whatever language she could manage, she'd go and find the mayor, and she'd say, "I'm here to proclaim this message of Baha'u'llah to the people of this city." And she would do that. There would be such a confirmation in that in a series of occasions, the mayor would make some kind of street announcement. The main hall of the city would be opened, and in the afternoon, Martha would be speaking to 1,000 people through a translator, Portuguese translator. There would be a newspaper report. There would be all kinds of interest and exciting, how can we get literature in this also? And then she was back on the ship and went to the next city and did this. So she did this kind of a proclamation as a travel teacher. And you know, when she passed away, Shoghi Effendi said she was the archetype of travel teachers for men and women, east and west, young and old, black and white. She was the archetype travel teacher. No, yeah, this is interesting for the women, you know, they say, no women on the House of Justice, what is this? And that. The women have been the great pioneers of the cause, carrying the faith all over the world. Do you know there's something called the, what is it, the Galaxy of Baha'i Women, or I've forgotten the name. Shoghi Effendi says this special status in the other world where these great souls have gone, like Lua Getzinger and Mae Maxwell and Keith Ransom Kaler, and he adds on some of the later ones, and particularly Juliet Thompson is added. And there was a wonderful woman that went to Tripoli in a wheelchair and died. And she was added to the group. And there was one man among all the women, Hai Dun, who had gone to Australia with his wife. All women. It's one of the arguments that we have is that these women became hands of the cause of God. They were the great champions of the faith throughout the world. Their position is very high. The position of a teacher is higher than an administrator, Shoghi Effendi says. Interesting to bear that in mind if you have somebody saying, well, why aren't women on the House of Justice? I remember Mr. Semple saying he thought it was the mercy of God. You know, sometimes you get the impression traveling around somebody'd like to be on the House of Justice. I always quietly say to myself, I don't say to them, but I say to myself, I say, you know, this guy needs to be on the House of Justice for 6 months and see what it is he wants. The glory he thinks is there is solid work, day and night. Talk about 24/7, my goodness. You see me now looking young, or maybe kindly looking. Now, some people say, well, why did you leave the House of Justice? Well, I didn't leave. Actually, that's always a decision of the House and together. But the point is that when I left, it took me 2 years to recover before I felt like I could move around. We went in a house that had a staircase in it. I could hardly get up the staircase. And now I run up and down or something. So thank you for entertaining me here and letting me come and speak to you, and that does make me feel young. And we all need to keep serving the cause. I'll tell you a little secret. You may not want this secret, but you're going to hear it anyway. Stanwood Cobb, an old believer, at the time the Master came to America, he's written his stories about Abdu'l-Baha, and he's written some wonderful Baha'i books too, Security for a Failing World and some other items. He asked the Master, so the story goes, asked the Master how he could live a long time. And Abdu'l-Baha said, say the long obligatory prayer every day. And I think he was 103 when he passed away. For those of you that may have some concern about the movements, it seems like it has more effect than just the spiritual one. Friends, Leonora Armstrong heard the report of Martha Root when she came back from South America. She wrote a diary, she put the names of the individuals that she found that were receptive, and she was ready to go off to another continent. And Leonora felt challenged by what she heard, that she could go. She had heard studies in the university. She was actually university trained, were in Latin languages. And she felt that maybe she could do this, but she felt very shy. She was always a very shy person. And she went to May Maxwell, who was not feeling very well, was in bed, lying back and feeling frail. And she asked May Maxwell, what did she think? She said, Martha Root has come back and she's ready to give me a copy of the diary. What do you think? Should I go or should I go? And she said, May Maxwell became illumined and sat straight up in bed. And she said, what are you waiting for? And she said that gave her the strength to get up and go. And her father, who wasn't very pleased about the whole thing, provided her with a ticket. And she told me she had money to live for about 2 weeks in Brazil, having gotten off the steamship in Rio, okay? That means no way back, no ticket to get back, and complete reliance, basically, on Baha'u'llah. It was an amazing feat of courage for this young lady. She got there and asked for the name in the Rio where she was to go, and found out that Santos wasn't there. It was another city. She had to get on another boat, had to go further south. She got there, she met the man that Martha Root had met and talked to. And he said, "My dear, what are you going to do here?" He said, "I'll hire you to teach my children English." That was her toehold in the beginning. Meanwhile, Abdu'l-Baha has heard or understood in his own way that she was in South America, 1919 this was. He wrote a beautiful tablet to her, put it in an envelope, addressed it to Miss Leonora Halsapple, Brazil, and put it in the post. Yeah, I think you realize Brazil's a fairly big place. You know? So this came, and because it said Miss on it, they sent it to the British Embassy. The British Embassy said, "We don't know her, we've never heard of her." So they sent it to the American Embassy. Nobody at the American Embassy of the staff knew anything about her. But they put it on a bulletin board. And somebody who came in had been a passenger on the ship that she came down with and said that lady was going to Santos. And so they sent it to the consul in Santos, and yes, he knew who she was, and the letter from Abdu'l-Baha reached her. And he said that he is supplicating and praying that she may be the cause of healing many, many souls of the illnesses of self and passion. Now we'll come back to this theme of self and passion during the week. So it's a very important one, because Abdu'l-Baha said those are the two veils that veil the mirror of the heart from the light of God that's shining on it at all times. My light is in thee, get thou from it thy radiance. What we want to think about this week through these three is, how do we increase the radiance in our hearts? How do we feel that love of Baha'u'llah, that he's shining on us? It's a ceaseless love, but we come and go. I remember Bill Sears years ago, he says, the hand of the cause, he said, if you don't feel as close to God as you used to, who moved? So, movement is an important part of the plan that the House of Justice has given to us. And I remember dear Mr. Hawley proclaiming in 1958, he was talking about pioneering. He said, pioneering is not so much moving from an old place to a new place as moving from an old self to a new self. And this is what we're doing locally, wherever we are. We need constantly to be moving from our old position closer to the Creator, closer to the confirmations that are at hand for us. Friends, I think that maybe it's enough for tonight. I mean, you're very kind, patient, but we'll leave it for the morning. Will be first thing you have to listen to me again. I don't know what arrange this program in a nice way. So we will see you then, and meanwhile, you have a fine evening. Thank you.